picture this moment with me. You are sitting at a desk, or perhaps you are standing in the middle of a room that needs to be cleaned. You are trying. In fact, you are trying harder than anyone else could possibly understand. Your internal engine is revving. You are pushing against a mental wall with everything you have. But on the outside, you look frozen. To the rest of the world, you look like you are checking out. You look like you do not care. And then you hear those words. Those stinging, familiar words that you have probably heard since you were a small child. Lazy, careless, not trying hard enough, wasted potential. For many people living with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, those words are not just insults, they are scars. They sting because they completely ignore the reality of what is happening beneath the surface. They ignore the biological truth of a brain that works differently. This is the part of the conversation that rarely gets talked about. We talk about focus, we talk about losing keys, and we talk about being hyperactive. But ADHD is not just about memory or sitting still. It is about how the brain manages stress, how it processes emotions, and how, after years of negative feedback, it shapes the way you see your own soul. It is not always the ADHD symptoms themselves that hurt the most. It is the trauma and the stigma that pile up around them, layer by heavy layer. Let us start by grounding ourselves in the science, because understanding your biology is the first step to forgiving yourself. We need to look at the brain. If you have ever wondered why focusing on a boring task feels like pushing your body through quicksand, there is a reason for that. It is not a lack of willpower. It is a difference in wiring. We have to talk about the prefrontal cortex. Think of this part of your brain as the manager of your mental office. In a neurotypical brain, the manager is sitting at the desk, organizing files, telling the employees what to do, and keeping everything running on a schedule. But in an ADHD brain, the prefrontal cortex does not always fire the same way. It is like the manager of your mental office keeps stepping out for coffee breaks. Or perhaps the intercom system is broken. The instructions are there, but they are not getting through to the rest of the team. Then we have the fuel system. We have neurotransmitters called dopamine and norepinephrine. These are the chemicals that help regulate attention and motivation. Imagine you are trying to drive a car. A neurotypical brain has a full tank of gas. When they want to go, they press the pedal, and the car moves. An ADHD brain is trying to drive with a fuel tank that keeps leaking. You are pressing the pedal to the floor. You are expending so much energy, but the engine just will not turn over. That is why starting a simple, boring task, like doing the dishes or sending an email, can feel physically impossible, even if you know it matters. You are not refusing to drive, you are out of fuel. But it goes deeper than just focus. We have to talk about the limbic system, specifically the amygdala. This is your brain's emotional amplifier. In the ADHD brain, this system tends to be extra sensitive. It means that emotions do not just tap you on the shoulder to get your attention. They kick the door wide open and flood the room. When you feel sad, you do not just feel a little blue, you feel devastated. When you feel frustrated, it feels like a physical fire in your chest. Feelings in ADHD are louder, heavier, and much harder to regulate. Science backs this up. We can literally see these differences on brain scans. But the key takeaway I want you to hold in your heart right now is this. It is not willpower. It is wiring. You are not broken. You are simply built differently. Now, I want you to imagine living with that specific brain wiring in a world that is designed entirely for neurotypical minds. This is where the story shifts from biology to psychology. This is where the trauma begins. Imagine a child in a classroom. They forget their homework on the kitchen table. They did not mean to, the thought just evaporated. But the teacher says, "You are so lazy." The child misses a deadline for a project. They are told, "You are just careless." They get overwhelmed by a loud noise or a sudden change in plans and burst into tears. People say, "You are overreacting. Stop being so dramatic." At first, when you are young, this just feels frustrating. You feel confused. But when it happens day after day, year after year, the message becomes clear. You start to believe that the problem is you. You internalize the idea that you are fundamentally flawed. Eventually, those critical voices do not just come from teachers, parents, or bosses. They start echoing inside your own head. You become your own bully. Here is what science tells us about this experience. Constant criticism and chronic stress do not just hurt your feelings, they actually change the physical function of your brain. It is a tragic irony. Repeated experiences of rejection keep the amygdala, that alarm system we talked about, on high alert. You are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You are constantly scanning the room for signs that someone is mad at you. At the same time, stress hormones like cortisol flood the system. High levels of cortisol actually weaken the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain responsible for focus and emotional control. So, in other words, the misunderstanding and the stigma do not just make life emotionally harder. They biologically reinforce the struggles the ADHD brain is already facing. The more you are criticized for your symptoms, the severe your symptoms might become, because your brain is under attack. This creates what we call the cycle of trauma in the brain. It starts with chronic negative feedback. Your brain already struggles with executive function, but now you are constantly told you are not good enough. This leads to internalized shame. It is no longer, "I made a mistake." The internal narrative becomes, "I am a mistake." There is a massive difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." This shame and fear of rejection keep the alarm center of the brain on edge. So, even everyday situations can feel unsafe. You might get an email from your boss that says, "Can we talk?" And your body immediately goes into a fight or flight response. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and you assume you are getting fired. This is a very common experience for people with ADHD. We have a name for this intense emotional reaction. It is often called rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. While it is not a formal medical diagnosis in the DSM yet, it captures a very real, very painful emotional experience reported by almost everyone in the ADHD community. It is an intense physical pain in reaction to perceived or actual criticism. Even a small comment, a slight change in tone of voice, or a text message without an emoji can feel like a dagger to the heart. It can ruin your entire day. To cope with this pain, many people develop a survival strategy called masking. Masking is the act of hiding your ADHD traits to fit in. It is forcing yourself to sit still when your body wants to move. It is obsessively checking your work 3 times because you are terrified of making a careless error. It is mimicking the social behaviors of the people around you so you do not say the wrong thing. But masking comes at a high cost. It drains your mental energy. It overworks that already tired prefrontal cortex. It is like performing a one-person play on a stage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Eventually, the curtain has to fall. This leads to profound exhaustion and burnout. You might come home from work or school and find that you cannot speak, you cannot move, and you simply need to stare at a wall for an hour. That is not laziness. That is the cost of trying to be someone you are not. And then, on top of all of this internal struggle, there is the external stigma. You have heard it. You tell someone you have ADHD, and they say, "Oh, everyone is a little ADHD sometimes." Or they say, "ADHD is just a trend." Think about how invalidating that is. Would you tell someone with asthma, "Everyone gets out of breath sometimes. You do not need that inhaler"? Of course not. Yet, that is exactly what happens with neurodivergence. This dismissal keeps people from seeking help. It makes you feel like you are making it up, or that you are just looking for an excuse. The stress of not being believed keeps the brain in that fight or flight mode. It keeps the cortisol flowing. And over time, as we discussed, chronic stress weakens those connections in the brain, making focus, memory, and emotional regulation even harder. It is a vicious loop. The stigma does not just dismiss the condition, it actively worsens it. So, how do we break this cycle? How do we step out of the shame loop and into the light? The first step is validation and diagnosis. Understanding that your brain is wired differently and not broken is the foundation of healing. When you realize that your struggle to focus is not a moral failing, but a dopamine deficiency, you can stop hating yourself and start solving the problem. You can move from self-judgment to self-curiosity. We must also reframe the narrative. Yes, ADHD comes with challenges, but ADHD brains also bring incredible strengths. We need to talk about the creativity, the ability to think outside the box, because your brain does not even see the box. We need to talk about the innovation, the resilience, and the ability to hyperfocus on passions. When an ADHD brain falls in love with a topic, it can learn more in a week than most people learn in a year. We need to talk about the empathy. Because you have felt misunderstood, you are often the first person to notice when someone else feels left out. Real treatment is holistic. It is not just about medication, though medication can be a life-changing tool for many. It also means therapy, specifically trauma-informed therapy that understands the history of shame. It means ADHD coaching to learn practical strategies that work with your brain, not against it. It means learning how to organize your life in a way that suits you, rather than trying to force yourself into a neurotypical mold. But perhaps the most important tool is self-compassion. The brain thrives when we unlearn shame and replace it with patience and kindness. This is a practice. It is the practice of catching yourself when you say, "I am so stupid," and gently correcting it to, "I am struggling right now, and that is okay." It is the practice of treating yourself with the same gentleness you would offer to a best friend or a small child. If you are listening to this and you see yourself in these words, I want you to know something very important. The shame you carry was never yours to carry. It was placed on you by a world that did not understand your language. It was placed on you by a school system designed for one type of mind. It is time to put that heavy bag down. And if you do not have ADHD, but you love someone who does, the best thing you can give them is compassion and curiosity. Ask them how their brain works. Validate their experience. When we finally see ADHD for what it really is, a brain difference, not a character flaw, we do not just help people survive. We help them thrive. We help them access the brilliance that is hiding behind the anxiety. Maybe, just maybe, the more we talk about this, the less often someone with ADHD will have to hear those damaging words. Maybe we can replace lazy with unsupported. Maybe we can replace careless with overwhelmed. Maybe we can replace not trying hard enough with trying their absolute best in a world not built for them. I want to leave you with a small exercise today. If you are feeling that familiar wave of overwhelm or shame, stop. Put your hand over your heart. Feel the warmth of your palm against your chest. Remind yourself that you are safe. Remind yourself that your worth is not measured by your productivity. Your worth is not measured by how tidy your house is or how many emails you answered today. You are worthy simply because you exist. Your brain is a beautiful, complex, intricate machine. It might need different fuel. It might need a different kind of map, but it is capable of incredible things. Do not let the trauma of the past dictate the potential of your future. You are doing a wonderful job, even on the days when it feels like you are moving backward. Thank you for listening to this message. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Let us spread understanding like a ripple in a pond. Until next time, keep nurturing your happy aura. I am sending you so much love.